and welcome to this video. It's Claire and today I am going to share my experience visiting all 50 states in my Freightliner Sprinter van, what I learned, and I'll give my advice on how to do van life right. Let's go back to February 2022. It was a couple of months before our wedding. We were meeting somewhat regularly with a realtor to tour potential houses to buy, and none of them were really like hitting, if you know what I mean. The thought of dropping the amount of money needed to buy a home really freaked us out, especially when we realized how much we would need to spend for a house that was supposed to be our starter home. And we don't have kids, so we didn't really have any real obligations other than our jobs. So some might say that minimal obligations is a good thing, some might say it's a bad thing, but the reality of this situation for us meant that we could basically pick up and leave if we wanted to. I'm not saying if you have a house or kids or any of the typical life obligations you couldn't do van life. People do it all the time, but this is the main reason we realized we wanted to do it and that we could pull it off. I would definitely not consider myself to be an adventurer. I like to hike for a few hours on the weekends, once or twice a month, but other than that, I'm not one to like camp for days on end in the wilderness. I don't ski, bike, or really do any outdoor sports. I really just spend most of my downtime on the couch usually. So it came as a big surprise to me, and I think my husband, when I randomly decided I wanted to leave my cushy life and live in a van while traveling full time. I do love to travel, but staying in a hotel or an Airbnb for like a few days versus roughing it in a van for over a year are two very different things. So this is my first major point. With social media glamorizing van life, I don't think people always realize how hard it actually can be. So I'll admit this decision was really random and spur of the moment for us, but something I can't stress enough for somebody who is considering living in a van is that you have to be sufficiently prepared for the experience. So before taking the leap, you need to ask yourself, what are the amenities I literally cannot live without? And what are the amenities I could live without, but realistically, if I didn't have them, I would be super unhappy. Because if you're unhappy, you will burn out super quick. Luckily, I'm not trying to brag. I feel like I'm always like going off about how great our situation was, but my husband Andy is super talented. Like, I'm convinced there is literally nothing that he can't do. He literally can make anything. Like, I will point to a piece of furniture I see online and I'm like, I want this. He's like, I'll just build it. He can build anything and he can do it for the cheapest price possible at the same time. So he was able to build our van to actually be quite luxurious, and it wasn't nearly as, I guess you could say, bad as it could have been. Going into van life before we even bought the van, the amenities we knew we needed were a sink, a queen size bed, a fridge, a stovetop, an oven, and a toilet. So we did get all of those things, and it was done well enough that we were able to like comfortably live day to day. For example, was our sink as big as we would have had in a house? No, but it was big enough that it was comfortable. We could do our dishes and it didn't cause any major frustration. Likewise, the toilet was not a real toilet. It was literally a 5-gallon bucket with a funnel, but we were able to set it up so that you sat on it exactly like a toilet. So though it wasn't like as comfortable as it could have been, it helped us get by with the like level of comfortability that we needed to not burn out and hate living in a van. On the other hand, our fridge was way too small. It was a mini fridge, and obviously like going into it when we were doing the build, we didn't foresee this. We thought it was big enough, but our fridge proved to be too small, and that did kind of burn us out a little bit because we just weren't able to really like store any food. So that caused a lot of frustration. So you just have to go into the situation knowing, what do I have to have? What can I get by without? And what can I get by without, but like I would be much happier if I had it, and it would like be more likely to help me have like a successful van life experience. So when it came to us and our situation, all the amenities that we chose and that we implemented, obviously a lot of people get by with less, but we knew long term we would not last if we didn't have those things. So though you probably could get by like without a stove and a fridge, like realistically, is that gonna really make you happy? My second major point is employment. For the first 9 months, neither of us were employed while we lived in our van. And at the 9-month mark, Andy got a remote job and I was still unemployed. So we didn't have the stress of having to go to work every day while we lived in our van. Our main concern was just getting to where we wanted to be and accomplishing the things we decided on each particular day. So it was not bad at all for us, but I could see van life being really difficult for someone who is trying to do it while maintaining their regular life in all other areas. Not saying it can't be done, again, people do it all the time, but it for sure would be more challenging. On the same note, if you don't have a job while doing van life, you will have the stress of not having an income, but you will have complete freedom to go and do whatever you want, wherever you want. And if you do have a job, you'll be socking away money, which feels good, but you will be way more restricted in what you're able to accomplish day to day. So you kind of have to decide which pro and con combo you prefer. My third point is touching back on the glamorized aspect of van life. The whole time we lived in our van, Andy and I always said 80% of the time van life is like absolutely amazing, like it fulfills like that dream you have in your head, but the remaining 20% of the time sucks so bad. Like there are lots of low moments. So again, you're gonna want to be prepared to embrace the suck or you will not make it. Some examples of the sucky side of van life include, but are not limited to, dumping your gray water in your sewage pretty much every day, not fun, preparing food in a confined space with limited materials, and in turn having to resort to eating out more than you'd probably prefer, spending a lot of money on gas, not always getting to stay the night in the neatest spots. Walmart parking lots are your friend, but they will get really old night after night. And mechanical difficulties, like if your engine goes out, you will be stuck wherever you happen to be at that time for days to weeks. And having things not go as planned schedule-wise can be really frustrating and defeating. So it all comes with the territory, but I just want to put it out there, van life definitely has its downsides, and you need to be aware of the potential opportunity for disaster. I want to share the route that we ended up following over our 18-month-long journey in our van, not because I have any real regrets, but we could have done this so much better and smarter. When you hear our route, you are seriously gonna be like, what the F were these people even doing? We hit the road the third week of July 2022. We left Washington with the van filled to the brim, and we drove all the way to Michigan where Andy's family lives. We spent a couple of weeks there finishing up the construction of the van because the build wasn't done yet, and we dropped a lot of stuff there that we couldn't take with us, but that we also couldn't get rid of. So like Andy's snowboard, our bikes, etc. Then we went to Iowa where my family lives and we dropped more of our stuff. From there, call us crazy, but we went all the way back to Washington State. But it was for our friend's wedding, so like I feel like it was warranted. So for just that first month alone, we kind of like wasted a lot of time not really doing actual van life things. From Washington, we spent 7 days straight driving north through Canada up to Alaska, where we proceeded to spend the next month. Then, because we wanted to see the New England states in the fall months, we went from Alaska all the way across Canada and pulled into Michigan along the way. We stayed with Andy's family again, did some basic maintenance to the van, and then continued on up to Maine and ended up on the East Coast. By this point, it was October of 2022, and we spent the next 4 weeks just like bopping around all the little New England states. The week before Thanksgiving, we had only made it to like Maryland, so we kind of had to pick up the pace a little bit and go through the Virginias, Ohio, Indiana, and Illinois to make it back to Iowa for the holiday. After Thanksgiving, we went down to Florida, taking about a week to stop in the states along the way. We spent 6 whole weeks in Florida. Then we went back up through Georgia, the Carolinas, and Kentucky back to Iowa again, where we left the van and the dog, and we hopped on a cute little flight to Thailand, and we spent the whole month of February in Thailand. So now we're to March 2023. We drove from Iowa down to Louisiana, and then we went across Texas, those southwest states, and up California. Then we cut back across to, you guessed it, Michigan. So basically the whole first year, we would just do these like little month-long jaunts and end up back at our home bases to regroup. And by this point, we were tired of wasting all this time like driving back and forth to Iowa or Michigan over and over again. But by now, the van's paint had started to rust, like really bad. It was bad enough we had to stop everything we were doing. We had to abandon our plans and take care of the problem before it caused permanent damage. So we arrived back in Michigan the second week of May, planning to be there for a month. And as is typical for this kind of situation, it obviously took much longer than we anticipated. We ended up being in Michigan to fix the van for 2.5 months. That month-long plan of repainting the van turned into almost 11 weeks. So basically actually like the bulk of the summer, which was kind of a bummer because there was a lot of summer activities we were really excited about. So that's a good example of how frustrating it can be when there's issues with your rig and it messes up your entire plan. Finally, the end of July 2023, we were able to officially hit the road again. At this point, we knew we only had about 6 months left, so we wanted to go back through and visit those states we missed the first time around. We went through Wisconsin and Illinois up to New York. From New York, we went to Tennessee, and from Tennessee, we went to Utah. And finally, for the final time, we went back to both of our home bases to grab all that stuff that we had left there at the beginning of our van life adventure. And then we drove back to Washington in completion of our journey. What a whirlwind. And again, I don't have any real regrets with how we did things. We were operating with the knowledge, agenda, and commitments that we had at the time. But looking back, we shouldn't have signed up for so many mental obligations. Like, not going home for Thanksgiving for 1 year probably would have been okay. Like, we didn't need to stress ourselves out by having to book it from Maryland to Iowa just for like a long weekend to celebrate Thanksgiving. Slowing down and waiting around in the Pacific Northwest until after my friend's wedding and then going to our home bases to drop our stuff probably would have been more wise. This way, we wouldn't have felt like we had so many places that we like had to be, and we could have quite literally just gone where the wind carried us. On a similar note, I want to talk about things that we would do differently if we were to do van life full-time again, so you can learn from our mistakes. If we could go back in time and do van life again, I would actually not set the goal of visiting all 50 states. I know that's the title of this video, and that's like the big draw when traveling full-time. Like, I was hell-bent on hitting every US state in our van life adventure, but for me, this ended up proving to be really annoying by the end. I think looking back, I would again just go where the wind takes you. And don't put the pressure on yourself to visit every state, because then you're gonna be rushing through areas you don't wanna rush through. You'll be doing a lot of unnecessary driving, and it's gonna be stressing you out because you'll be, for example, up in New York and you have to go all the way down to hit Tennessee. Another thing I would do differently is how I kind of like approached my attitude going into van life. What I mean by this is when we first moved into the van, I was so excited for what was to come that I literally could not see where we would be when the time came for van life to be over. Like, I remember quite literally being like, we are gonna do this forever, we're never gonna stop. And like, obviously that's not realistic. Like, you're not gonna live in a van for the rest of your life. Of course we're not gonna live in a van for the rest of our life, but I just couldn't see far enough ahead to know what the next step was gonna be for us. Like, I didn't know if we'd go back to the West Coast, if we'd move somewhere else entirely new, if we'd move closer to home. And like, that was actually a really beautiful thing. Like, I think sometimes the unknown can be really interesting, and it's fun to like just see what the outcome ends up being. But because when we left, we were so open about the possibility that we might not be back, this sort of in a way ended up creating like a negative view, I think, among like other people about our plans. So eventually when we did end up back where we started in Washington, like literally exact same jobs, like the exact same life that we had before, this kind of actually led some people to be kind of like, oh, how interesting, right back where you started. But like, that possibility was never really off the table. And coming back, thanks to our van life adventures, what we now know is exactly where we're supposed to be. And you know, this is what we know now for sure is our home, is not a negative thing. We are so happy and relieved to know for certain that this is where we're supposed to be. We now have zero doubts, and we can just like relax, enjoy our life, and love it here without like always wondering about other possibilities and just like curious about what else is out there. I of course can't talk about van life without touching on the best parts about it. So if you're someone who's considering buying a rig and doing this whole situation, I want to leave you with the best parts, because in the end it is the positives that you'll look back on fondly and just have like the most amazing memories. So I do have to say, the freedom overall compared to what I would consider to be like regular life is unmatched. Though I have my complaints and things that I wish I'd done differently, we did have the freedom to visit every US state, and I feel like I can confidently say that's not something that most people can accomplish in under 2 years. Once Andy got his remote job, we were socking away money that we otherwise would have been spending on rent, so mentally that felt amazing. We got to spend our entire first year of marriage together, like 24/7. So like, it was basically an 18-month-long honeymoon. Some might think that might not be a good time, and don't get me wrong, we had our moments, like some of the worst fights we've ever had. But again, I am just like so in love with my husband. Overall, I just like absolutely loved it. Actually, now that I think about it, we never really had what I would consider to be like a real fight until we lived in the van. We got to be snowbirds for a winter. We had some amazing camping spots. We got to visit a ton of national parks. We were able to visit friends and family we otherwise would not have been able to. And we had the opportunity for them to like show us around where they live. We got to see their homes. We saw a ton of historical sites and famous locations from movies and TV shows. We learned life lessons individually and as a couple, and we got to truly explore this beautiful country that we live in. And saying screw it, giving up those typical life obligations, and embracing the unknown and uncertainty is what allowed us to do this. It was an amazing once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and if you're interested, considering it, wanting to do it, all I have to say is take the leap. Seriously, follow your dream and do it. And that doesn't just go for van life, that goes for like any dream that you have for yourself. I hope you found this video helpful. Thank you for sticking around to the end. If you enjoyed it, please give it a like, subscribe to my channel, and turn on the bell notification. See you next time. Bye!